Shame was my prison, and my therapist helped break me free. Nearly 20 years, I was living life under a cloak of shame, and I didn't need to. But it's when I started to own who I am and accept who I am with love that I really start to begin to feel the happiest that I've ever felt. And it just made me think also the power of good therapy, of seeing not just a good therapist, an amazing therapist. I will always refer to my therapist as my angel, she really saved my life. She really got me out of a bad place and helped me own who I am. Welcome to the Unashamed podcast. My name is Elizabeth G, and I'm an author and former sex worker. My podcast is a sexual journey of my life and the positive sides to sex work. However, there have been violent relationships, substance abuse, and dealing with shame, but it wasn't forever, and I now live my life without shame, and you can too. So why do people pay for sex? That is such a broad question. There's not really one answer. From my experience of sex work, the main reason really is connection. That skin-on-skin connection, that energy between humans that we all crave. Really, that has been the basis of sex work, why a person would pay for sex in the first place. If it was just about sex, the person would be at home watching porn, masturbating. The fact that there's another human there kind of proves that it's all about physical connection, energy. I think that's really the basis of it, but that answer is different for each client. So, for example, I've seen clients who are going through a really, really shit time. They're suicidal, they're depressed, they need someone to comfort them. They need to engage with someone and to talk and feel heard. Obviously, sex is a part of sex work, but there is so much more to it that people don't realise. My experiences have been largely positive, and I look back over the course of my career and I look back at all the people that I've helped, and I feel a sense of pride with that. Yet, with sex work, we don't really see that side to the industry. It's all about sex workers being victims and working in an industry that appears to be seedy. But my experiences have been largely positive. I very much feel like I've been a therapist to my clients. So yeah, some clients, they're going through a tough time. They need to connect with somebody, talk to somebody, have a hug it out with somebody. It's as simple as that. There are obviously other reasons. Some people, it's just to have some fun, a bit of escapism. They might want to explore a fantasy that they feel like they can't do anywhere else. So with a sex worker, they're exploring something in a space where they don't feel judged. It's a very safe space for them to talk about certain fetishes and fantasies that they might feel they get judged or shamed for elsewhere. But a lot of clients that I've seen have just wanted to connect with somebody. For some people, it's more the fact that there's no commitment involved, it's drama-free. At that point in their life, they might not want to be in a relationship, but they still want to connect with somebody and have sex. And sex work is a great part of that. I always remember one client saying to me all these years, and it stuck with me. He said to me, "I'm not paying for you to stay, I'm paying for you to leave." And it was as clear and simple as that, really. It's very simple and to the point. We both knew the score, and at the end of the allotted time, we both got on with our lives. So I think for some clients, the appeal is they get their needs met, but they don't have to commit to anything after that for various different reasons. So I think that really kind of put it very clearly to me when that client said that to me many years ago. I've always remembered it. But there is so much more to sex work than people realise, and sometimes it is just to have some fun and have a bit of escapism and to do things that they probably couldn't do elsewhere. But really the core of it is helping people. It's listening to people. It's engaging with people. Perhaps clients feel like they're not being listened to in their personal life, they're being ignored or they're being taken for granted, and they just want someone to really hear them out and to listen. I think back to other clients actually, and one particular client who was going through a really, really tough time. He'd gone through a terrible breakup. And when he came to me, he said, on the way here, I was thinking of jumping in front of a train because I just don't know what to do. And in that moment, we just talked, nothing else, nothing physical. We just sat and talked, and I listened to him, and I was able to comfort him and reassure him. And a couple of days later, he messaged me and said, "Thank you so much for that 1 hour with you, made me feel so much better." And he was able then to move on with his life. So there's really a healing side to the sex industry and to sex workers that a lot of people aren't aware of. And that's what I want to open people's minds, to help people to see there is so much positivity to the side of the sex industry that they don't know, and to perhaps have a bit more compassion and understanding to sex workers, because sex workers, even today, are still so stigmatized. We can't live our lives openly. For many of us, I can't speak for everybody, but certainly for me, I had to live my life in shame for the best part of 20 years. And shame is very, very unhealthy. Shame causes people to live in isolation and fear. So if I can just start to speak more openly about my experiences and allow people to see that there is so much positivity to the sex industry and how important sex workers are to society, then I hope that will make life better for the next generation of sex workers, so that they don't have to live under a cloak of shame like I did. But the scary thing about shame for me is that I didn't even realize I was feeling shame until my therapist pointed it out. It's a very much almost invisible thing. But then I looked at my behaviors and how I was acting, and I realized my therapist was right. The hiding stuff about my life, not talking to people openly about my work, or avoiding certain social situations for fear of judgment or fear of shame or for fear of being abused. I mean, there had been times in the past when I had been honest and open with people and they didn't react well, or they'd openly abuse me or shame me. So from those experiences, I had to learn to really be cautious to who I talk to about my job. And as a result, I kept my inner circle very, very small and did avoid certain situations, did feel like I had to hide myself and my profession. Even things like going into an estate agent's. A sex worker can't walk into an estate agent's and say openly what they do for a living, because they just won't get the flat or the house. The estate agents would admit that, I don't think, but there's so much discrimination against sex workers even today. And I think it's about time that that changed, because sex workers are a really important part of society and we really do help a lot of people, more than people realise. So if I could kind of bring sex work to the mainstream and let people see it's just another job, the danger is not in the work itself. The danger really is in the people that want to shame us and shove us into a corner and hide us. That's where the danger is, because there are people out there who will exploit that and do exploit that. It's the aggressive perpetrators who exist everywhere and anywhere, but it's the sex workers who are shamed and stigmatized. And I think it's about time that changed. I think we can start to open up our minds and allow sex workers to become more part of our society and more accepted. And that in turn will help them to live their life more safely and more openly as themselves. So how I got into sex work, I had just graduated from university with a Bachelor of Arts in Marketing, and I was adamant I did not want to go straight into the corporate world. So I decided to spread my wings and travel to Australia. And it was whilst I was traveling that I came across an opportunity to work in a massage parlour, giving happy endings. And the sex industry was something I was always curious about from a really young age. Even when I was at university, I looked into working in strip clubs. I was very curious about it. And I was raised very much amongst the ladette culture of the 90s. So lad mags were huge then, FHM. High Street Honeys was a big thing. And you had the pin-ups like Jordan, as she was back then, Carmen Electra, Melinda Messenger, all these women I remember having a huge influence on me. And they just looked like they had their lives in control in a sense of financial means. They were earning their own money, they were having fun, feeling sexy at the same time. And it just really appealed to me. So when the opportunity came, when I was in Sydney, I grabbed it. And it was there in Sydney where I began my years of experience working in the sex industry. When I returned to the UK nearly 10 years later, I went straight into acting school to study my master's in acting. And it was then that I upgraded from erotic massage to working as an escort to pay my tuition fees, which is actually a very, very common thing. When you look at the statistics, how many students do turn to the sex industry to pay for their tuition fees. I had tried to get other means of work. I tried bars and restaurants, but nobody would take me on. They weren't hiring at the time. And so it really was the perfect solution in a sense, because I wouldn't need to work a lot. It meant that it wouldn't get in the way of my studies, and I would earn enough to cover my rent and food and the rest of my tuition fees. So it really felt like the perfect solution. So from there, I started to build my experiences as an escort. At the time, I mean, I partied a long time before I worked as a sex worker, but at the time, back then, I was partying, and it kind of went hand in hand, I guess, with that lifestyle. And then from there, I ended up getting into a relationship that ended up being abusive. And this relationship came from meeting a client. So then that kind of took me down a path of surviving domestic abuse, really, and slowly saw my dream of becoming an actor kind of slipping away. So my life took a very different turn after that. And my life all became about survival. So with the warning signs of the abusive relationship I was in, what were the red flags that I missed? And I look back now and they're so obvious, but at the time I had no experience of domestic violence. I had no clue. So the first one, really, he was so incredibly charming. He was the most charming person I'd ever met. He put me so high on a pedestal. He made me feel more loved than anybody had ever made me feel. He was Mr. Charming, Prince Charming, promised me the world, completely swept me off my feet, and I was completely blinded by it all. I mean, this really lasted a few months, and then the cracks started to show. So with abusers, I guess the main red flags are, they're very, very charming, Mr. Prince Charming or Mrs. Prince Charming. They may call you obsessively. So he would ring and ring and ring. Like I would get 15 missed calls from him. And in the beginning, I thought, oh my gosh, this guy really likes me. So they can become obsessive. It's a term we know now today as love bombing. This relentless phone calls, relentless text messages. But then it's like the little signs that are there, they might just be very subtle. So the first thing he said to me, I knocked his drink over that was on the floor. It was a glass of port. And he came down to me and looked over me and his eyes just went jet black. And he said to me, you're pathetic. And that was the first real sign. And I thought, oh gosh, what's going on? Like everything had been so idyllic, but it's that thing about little subtle signs. And this would carry on for the best part of 2 years. Things would be amazing and great. And then he'd start to tell me I wasn't right in the head. Something's wrong with me. I need to go and see my therapist. Yet when I did, he was convinced I was fucking him and told me I couldn't see him again. It was all about control. So he would control my finances, who I saw, and he slowly started to isolate me from my friends and family. But this was over a course of a long period of time. It's very, very slow and very subtle, which is why it can be so confusing. And then when that finally did end, it was all about picking up the pieces, getting back on my own 2 feet. So after that relationship finished and I was finally able to move on, I then returned back to sex work and working as an escort. This time, though, it was actually to pay my tax bill. Ironically, I feel the system with HMRC is quite broken. I don't think it works at all. You pay your tax bill once a year. Everybody struggles with it in January, especially after Christmas. And I think they need to change that system a bit. But that was really my main reason for returning. But it was there really that I went from strength to strength. I started to work my way up through the escort agencies, build lots of regular clients, really started to find my feet with it and really enjoy it. I then upgraded to an agency in Mayfair and started to do bookings around all the high-end London hotels, which is all great, it's all fabulous, but it doesn't always equal the best bookings. What it all comes down to is the chemistry between myself and the client. That's what made a good booking amazing, is if you just clicked with someone. And sometimes you click with people and sometimes you don't. And it's the same with sex work. But from that point, I started to work my way through it and really accept that this was my profession and that I enjoyed it and started to own it more. And it was when I started to own it that I started to earn more money and get more regular clients. And then it wasn't really till my current therapist, who I met a few years ago, and she really highlighted the fact that, I was feeling shame and that I didn't need to. It's just a job. It's helping people. And that's when I really felt myself start to soar. And as a result of that great therapist, I got myself sober and I got myself on the property ladder, invested in a holiday let, and really began to find my feet. And it was all because I broke through those barriers of shame. And it made me realize how damaging shame is. All those years, nearly 20 years, I was living life under a cloak of shame, and I didn't need to. But it's when I started to own who I am and accept who I am with love that I really start to begin to feel the happiest that I've ever felt. And it just made me think also the power of good therapy, of seeing not just a good therapist, an amazing therapist. I will always refer to my therapist as my angel, she really saved my life. She really got me out of a bad place and helped me own who I am. And I had seen a few therapists before her, and some were okay, some not so good, but she really helped me become the best version of myself. And I think a great therapist can really help a person to break through so many things. And she really did help me break through those barriers of shame. And so it's from my experiences of shame, of sex work, that I'm talking here today. I don't want other people to go through what I went through. I don't want other people to feel like they have to hide who they are just for doing something that's natural to them. And sex work just felt natural to me, like it does for a lot of people out there who are probably living in shame, isolating themselves right now. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that sex workers don't have to live in shame. Society are part responsible, but we're all responsible. We can all learn to be more compassionate and more understanding, and help sex workers to come out of those shadows and to really embrace themselves in a safe environment. It doesn't have to be dangerous. It's not dangerous from my experiences. My experiences were largely positive, and I met some really lovely clients who helped me as well as me help them. It was kind of a two-way street. We'd explore things together. I'd explore more of my dominant side. In the early years, I was definitely more submissive. But certain clients would help me tap into the dominatrix inside of me, and I do the same for them. It was kind of a two-way thing. We'd help each other. And I just think, why can we not be more open about it, especially in the UK? I think sex is such a taboo subject. But if we can just normalize talking about it, then it doesn't have to be such a shameful, dark thing. My experiences of it all have been very, very positive. I would happily admit that I was a hedonist of the early 2000s, and I loved to party, I loved to take drugs. It was a big part of my 20s and into my 30s, actually, but I loved to take ecstasy, and I loved to go to clubs and dance and spend all night dancing and lose myself on the dance floor. I think in some ways I was kind of escaping something, maybe just wanting to just be myself and just live in that moment. But I was a true hedonist of the early 2000s, and ecstasy kind of fed into that. And also the sex work fed into all of that. I was that person anyway. I wasn't doing drugs because of the sex work or to get through it. I did drugs because I just loved to party, and I loved to go out and dance all through the night until sunrise. But yeah, the drugs also did come with the sex work. Later on, it started to go more into cocaine, which towards the end I hated. I hated that drug. It was, for me, it just wasn't my kind of drug. I was more of the hedonist, the raver, the ecstasy kind of drug user. But it was the cocaine and the alcohol, actually, that those two together, I started to hate towards the end. And that the turning point came when I just got to the point where it just wasn't fun anymore. And the hangovers and the next day, the come downs would last for days, sometimes weeks. And I just thought, I've just had enough of this. I just can't do this anymore. I'd just done it to a point where I'd just done it so much that really was the turning point. It just wasn't fun anymore. And that, plus the combination with my great therapist that I still see now, that's what helped me to get sober. The first year was definitely the hardest. I had a couple of slip-ups along the way, but I've gone from wanting to obliterate myself every couple of months to just not wanting to do that anymore. And I'm definitely the happiest and healthiest that I've ever felt. And I love being at home with a cup of tea in my pajamas by 8 o'clock and getting a good night's sleep. Definitely over going out, getting drunk, not knowing what I'm doing, who I'm talking to, and not remembering anything the next day. And actually, I've found I have been going out and I have been able to go to festivals and to raves and have nothing. And I have the best time and I can dance all night. And the next day, I'm fine and I don't feel crap. So I'm now 2 years sober and I'm the happiest and healthiest that I've ever been. I'm able to put in healthy boundaries with friendships, clients and family. I'm on the property ladder. I have my holiday let and I finally have my passive income. And I live my life without shame and I'm free to be myself, which is just a really, really great place to be. I'm Elizabeth G and I live my life without shame.